The presenting sponsor of Moon Tower Soccer is FVF Law.
To find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm, you can visit fvf.law.
Hello friends, and thanks for listening to Moon Tower Soccer. We have a extremely busy show today. We are going to talk about Austin FC's home opener versus the San Jose Earthquakes. We're also going to talk to Christian Polanco from the Cooligans. He was in town for the game, so we're going to get a little bit of insight on his experience and what he thought of the game. And then we're also going to talk to Patrick Murphy from the Massive Report in Columbus and give a little preview of the Columbus game coming up and ask him whether or not he thinks this is going to become a proper rivalry. And then we'll also talk a little bit about the midweek Minnesota game. My name's Landon Cottom, and I'm joined as always by Mr. Jeremiah Bentley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremiah Bentley, and I am tired by that intro. And a little bit still, like, coming down off the weekend, I spent yesterday scrolling social media, like, looking at everybody's posts and videos from the madness that was the first match. It was so good. So let's just talk a little bit about our own experiences, and I'll just start by asking you, so how did you get there? When did you get there? And sort of, like, what was your day like?
Oh, yeah, this is good to talk about. So transit is a like kind of a big topic around these games, and I think will be for this foreseeable future. So I live on the south side of town, so did a bunch of research into what would be the fastest way. The 803 bus leaves not far from my house, but it was going to take like an hour and 15 minutes once you got on the bus to even get to the stadium. So we decided to drive north to the North Lamar Transit Center, which took about 20 minutes to get there, and then caught the 383 bus up to the stadium, which took another 15 minutes or so. We got there in less than an hour from like William Cannon in South Austin. So pretty efficient. And then it was free, so we didn't have to buy tickets or anything. Just stepped on a bus and sat down, and they took us there. So it was pretty easy.
Yeah, that was. And we took we went to the Lakeline Center, which is about 3 miles from our house. Hopped on the red line, and I'd say 80% of the people on the train were dressed the same, all in their Austin FC jerseys. Rode the train down, and it was like 20 minutes to Kramer Station. Then, it's really, I had the impression, maybe from reading people from Columbus who are experts on how long it takes to walk places, that it was going to be like a super long walk. But I would say from the Kramer Station to Hop Squad was like 7 minutes for pregame. And then like from Hop Squad to the stadium's like, 10 minutes or something too? Like, it was really easy.
So we were walking from the bus stop to Hop Squad and crossed the train tracks there on Breaker and looked over and could see the station. And I was like, that looks too close, but I know there's not another station there. So I was like, it's actually a very easy walk. So if you're on the train line, then that seems like a no-brainer to do that one.
Yeah, it was a really easy trip. So we ran into each other at Hop Squad. We did a little video. I don't even know what it was. We did the Striker live.
Oh, it was like a live stream for the Striker.
Yeah, for the Striker. That was fun for a bit. Roberto asked us a bunch of questions. Tried to get me to trash somebody in order to make them play better, which I singled out Roddy Redis, and I don't know that he lived up to that exactly, but it was okay.
Well, he didn't play.
Oh, that's right. He wasn't part of the substitution pattern. Well, darn it. But yeah, overall, good time. Marched the match, met the bus, all that stuff was pretty amazing.
Yeah, the march was pretty fantastic. I took some video and posted it to Twitter and Instagram on the Moon Tower Soccer accounts. And getting up to the steps in front of the stadium and looking back, like, I knew there were a lot of people, but even I, like, when I turned around and started filming there, I was like, holy crap, this goes back a long way, and it's a very wide snake of people coming down the street. And that was a pretty cool moment to look back and just, like, because we've never done this stuff before, right? I didn't know what it's going to look like. And yeah, that was a pretty impactful moment right there, coming around that corner into the stadium.
Yeah, and I remember thinking that when we, Denver was probably a couple hundred, and so that's a little bit what I was expecting for this one, but it was way more than that. I mean, it blew. I had a friend who met me kind of halfway, who went to the game with me, and I was telling her about it, and she said she was expecting, this little stream of folks with banners, and was just amazed by like the flow of folks all dressed and chanting and all the flags and all that. I mean, what a great experience to get in and be a part of that.
Yeah, for sure. It seemed like the players were extremely appreciative of the atmosphere in the stadium. San Jose's coach mentioned how special it was. I could be wrong, but I'm 95% sure that when the game ended, JC Marcinkowski, San Jose's goalkeeper, turned around and clapped the supporter section. And so, like, I don't know, that was all really special. The to start off with, the tifo was amazing. To see something that the fan community created, and then the having McConaughey come out. We'll talk about McConaughey with Christian Polanco here in a little bit, so we'll kind of leave that out for now. But that was pretty cool, and then just to see that supporter section going crazy and certain moments. I know all the songs, and so like I knew what was about to happen, and my parents came to the game with me, and during I think it's the Club de Cuervos song. So the game was going on, and I just like tapped my mom on the shoulder. Like I wasn't going to miss the game, but I was like, Mom, you should watch the supporter section in about 5 seconds because it's going to be awesome. And that like, I think the two things that surpassed all expectations were how amazing the supporter section was. I knew it was going to be big. I knew it was going to be special, but it's the first time we've done it like live. And so maybe there's going to be some kinks to work out. That didn't seem to be the case at all. It was rocking already from day one of the best MLS atmospheres that exist. Number two, the thing that surprised me or like exceeded expectations the most was how good the view from my seats are.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It's they're very good. And like, I know some people are going to hear this and say like, oh, well, you paid $3,000 for them. I did not get fancy pants seats. This is recorded on this show. They're very well located, normal person seats. But yeah, the view was amazing. And it's having not seen that many soccer games in person before. That was pretty awesome. And I'm very happy with the view from there.
Yeah. And one other fan moment that I think we should get into before we talk about the actual game was the Macala Olala at the end, right? When everybody got their phones out near the end of the match, like at 85 or whatever. And that was like started the supporter section, but that was throughout the whole stadium too, which I thought was really cool to see. That picked, that really, everybody picked that up really quickly. I think everybody picked up all right, because that's kind of been the signature chant, throughout all of this. And then one of the other ones seemed to like cover the whole stadium. I can't remember what it was right now.
Yeah, I don't remember either, but some of the easier ones picked up, and some of the people around where we were sitting were just singing "Ole, ole, ole" to "All right, all right, all right." And I was like, they'll learn. It's fine. It sounds the same to everyone else right now, so as long as they're singing, that's fine. So before we talk about the game, I thought it'd be fun to bring in the interview I did with Christian Polanco a little earlier. He was brought in to the game by. I believe Captain Morgan brought in some like media folks, and so he took advantage and got to come to the stadium opening. And so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of get an outsider's view of what he thought of Austin, what he thought of the stadium, and what he thought of the game day atmosphere. So we'll cut over to that interview right now with Christian Polanco from the Cooligans. All right, we are now joined by one of these soccer cooligans. Some would say the coolest soccer cooligan. Don't tell Alexis we said that. Christian Polanco. Christian, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Thank you so much for having me, Landon. It's nice to be on this Zoom call just as much as it was in real life. Right?
So this was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your first trip since COVID started, and then your first time to Austin, correct?
Yeah, as far as definitely like getting on a plane to go anywhere. Yes, first trip, first like Cooligans related thing that we've done since the pandemic began. And yeah, it was great.
So what were your overall impressions of the city?
The city was that, well, before I went out there, I had posted on Twitter saying that I was going to go. I got about 4,000 different taco spot recommendations, which I didn't even realize. I understand like a city could be known for something, but wow, it is on point. Every single person had their own place, their own. This is why you should go to this one and not that one. Or there's this clear. They could be like a taco derby, I think, in Austin with how fierce the rivalries seem to be. But impressions, I always say this because my impressions of cities are often clouded by the fact that most of the time, most of the reasons why I'm there is for something soccer related. Yeah. And everywhere I go, soccer supporters are always super nice and kind and welcoming. So I'm like, Austin's great. Minnesota's great. Atlanta, oh my God, that place is great. I have no differing opinion of all these cities.
So we had planned to get some food. I think you landed on Thursday, and you told me that you were like, oh yeah, I'm in line getting tacos, and I was like, oh well, I was gonna take you to get tacos later today, but we can go somewhere else. And you're like, what's the problem? I don't understand the question.
Yeah, it is. This is what you do here. I had no problem with it. Every I'm not the food aficionado like Alexis is, but what tacos are a food that is not, it's not too fancy where you're like, oh, what is my palate? It's not like wine tasting.
Yeah.
It's just good or not good, or flavorful or not flavorful. So the more the merrier. I was happy to have as many tacos as possible.
Oh yeah. For the record, listeners, I think he had Veracruz for lunch one day. And then we went to Vaquero Taquero for dinner that night, which it was very nice.
Yeah, that's a balanced meal in both places. It was totally fine. I loved it.
So what was your favorite part of this trip? So not including the soccer match itself. So like Saturday night aside, what was your favorite part of this trip?
It was cool to obviously like link up with you. So you introduced me to a couple other supporters. We were hanging out with your wife as well. Like honestly, that is the thing that I appreciate the most is like the people around the soccer community, because everyone is just like really cool and is like, given, since we've started our show and people like appreciate the show, and people are like, I want to show you what we're doing out here. So when we went to Oscar Blues, that I don't take those moments for granted, because depending on what city you're in, some supporters can be like, no, this is our thing, we don't let outsiders in. Sometimes they're like that, not all the time, but it is to see that the La Murga and the band playing all the songs, really getting everybody like ready for what was about to happen the next day at the game. That was like, it was cool to really like be a part of that. And also I can't get the Cinco Doce chant out of my head. I love Selena. Who doesn't love Selena? But that song is just, it's one of the, I was thinking about it today. I'm like, man, that is one of the cleverest, nostalgic chants you could have in soccer. It was just perfect.
Oh yeah, we're big proud of Selena here in Texas, and so we had to work one of those into the repertoire for sure. So going into the match day, what were your overall impressions of the stadium and just kind of the general game day environment?
Well, so luckily I had the privilege of going. I went there a day early, and I got to actually take a tour of the stadium. So I got to see every like nook and cranny, and like all the from the supporter section to the luxury club boxes and all this other stuff. And overall, it's like there's a clear like identity to like each part of the stadium. It reminded me a lot of Audi Field. It's like an Audi Field is like pretty modern, and you can sense it when you're there, but it feels a little bit more. It's a little smaller in some sense, like just a little, and it feels a little bit like you're like when you're walking through the concourses, you're like it feels more familial if that makes any sense. Like it's just like it's a little, the concourses are like a little narrower. You're like closer to everybody. It feels like a family sort of environment. Like you're about to like if you're watching a kid's soccer game and everybody's kind of like near each other or on like little benches and stuff like that around the field. So the stadium is great. It's I'm jealous as an NYCFC fan. The envy is real. But the ambiance was what was so memorable for me. It is one, like to have your first home game and to have that many supporters, that organized, all singing. They were clearly very loud. And starting a game with a hype video from Matthew McConaughey and him hitting it was ridiculous. I'm like, this is insane. Wow, how is this? How is it? I was telling other people, I'm like, man, the Matthew McConaughey, when he was out with the drum, that was like cool. And I already saw like people on Twitter like cringe and blah, blah, blah. And these people are not fun people. You don't want to be around. Oh, how could he? Why would you say that? It's just like such a, even if it's like, people want soccer to be like a certain way, but this is like so cool. And then the monologue that he did in that video, I'm like, it felt like Lincoln Lawyer, like an impassioned speech that he would give in a movie. Yeah. So I was just like, yo, all right, this is dope. I'm up for this. And then him coming out and doing the whole thing with the drum, like with the bongo, it was again perfect. And a good throwback to his making fun of his history. So yeah, all of that, like it was a show, and I think for Texas, and that's another thing that I really sensed that I think I've gone to new stadiums and around MLS and seen like the support culture and stuff like that. But this felt different in that, and I didn't even realize that until I really got there, was that you guys have never really had a professional, like Division I top tier sports team. And that's what I really noticed from a lot of people. Everybody was just so proud to have a team there that's playing at the highest level that I didn't expect that until I thought it was going to be like skeptical Texans and stuff like that, but it was the complete opposite. Everybody was like legit on board.
Yeah, it's been crazy to see how much of the city is paying attention to it at this point, and people who would have never even thought about MLS even 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh, this is my one critique. This is the one thing that I will imagine will get better over time. But I imagine a lot of the seats that I was in, I was like maybe I was kind of in the center pitch, about like 25 rows back, and there were I assume a lot of people maybe hadn't gone to soccer games before, but there were a lot of people in my row that kept getting up to get drinks. You can't do this in soccer. You do it at halftime. You do it before the game. You can't do it during the game because it's disruptive, obviously, to the people in the row. But also, you're going to miss. The lines are pretty long, especially on the first game. Lines are pretty long. There were people there that missed like the first 30 minutes because they went to get beers. Like, you could get beer everywhere else. Watch the game. That's my one criticism.
Yeah, I think there's probably... You could tell, like, even just with reactions to certain things in the game, that there are soccer fans in that stadium. But I think there's a lot of people, like you said, probably haven't been to many soccer games and are going to have to learn that, like, oh, this is different. And because when they come back with their pizza and their Heineken or whatever, they're like, oh, the game's half over now. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Going back to McConaughey there for a second, we were talking the other night about how I was always kind of a McConaughey skeptic, or like just didn't really take him very seriously before. Sure. And when he like forced his way into my life by becoming an owner of Austin FC, I still don't love everything he says and does, but his energy is like undeniable, and just like that charisma that he has. And so you could say like, oh, it's goofy that he went out in a green suit and is banging a bongo. But whenever you see him start doing it and watch some of those videos played back and see that supporter section interacting with it, it's pretty special. And even McConaughey's skeptics could watch that and be like, okay, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, I guess him being from Austin, I'm sure he's like a notable figure. I'm from New York. I just know him from movies, and I'm like, okay, he's a good, what would was it Wolf of Wall Street, which is the finance where he was like banging on his chest and the whole thing. He has just these moments. He's a man of moments that are so memorable, and that is what like builds a lot of careers, especially for actors in Hollywood. And look, if he could bring some of those memorable moments to soccer, I'm cool with it. I felt lucky to be there and see that. Cringe or not or whatever, like I fine, criticize it. I think it's something so unique to American soccer that I think part of the criticism that people give is a little bit of envy. I'm sure you don't think they'd take Matthew McConaughey at a Crystal Palace game, hyping up the fans. They wouldn't say no to that ever.
Yeah, for sure. So some other criticism that Austin FC fans have gotten recently was the chant practice in the stadium. Some pictures got posted that online, and people were like, "Oh, it's a stupid plastic, whatever other nonsense criticism."
I saw the guy who wrote the tweet. I went up to Phil. He saw me at the stadium. He's like, "Hey, Christian." I'm like, "It was you, wasn't it?" So we talked about it. We were laughing about it. It was funny.
I think whenever people in Austin are like familiar with what La Murga is doing and like what we all knew was going to happen on Saturday, probably felt a little bit like vindicated having seen what kind of energy was in the stadium, because it's not just people going into the stadium and like, okay, whenever the corner kick happens, we yell shots, 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 shots. Like, it's a bit more complex than that, what La Murga is doing. And it's essentially a band practice. And so the band had been practicing in the stadium for a couple of months now. And now that COVID protocols are loosening a little bit, they let the fans, like other fans, go in and sing along with them just to kind of get a sense of what it's going to be like in there. And so I think that kind of got lost in a photo and a caption on Twitter.
Yeah. Look, Landon, you do not have to justify that at all. Every supporters group practices. They all do. It was just you guys will always be a target because of the Columbus thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is just something you're gonna have to deal with probably for the rest of your life. I don't know. Like, it is. Look, and the plane even, right? That kind of threw some shade over something that was very unique and special. As a comedian, I'm like, this is hilarious. The Bants is wild. That this is I'm like, who's gonna take responsibility for this? Because I still haven't seen who is specifically responsible. But I saw that plane fly over, and it said Precourt is a snake, and I'm like, man. You gotta love it. It's like it's and even I had taken the photo, and I don't know if I was one of the first to put it up on Twitter. I put it on the Cooligans Twitter.
I think you were the most popular person to put it on Twitter.
All right, so that, you know what, I'll take it. And there are Austin fans and Columbus fans fighting in my mentions right now about this, and and there's all the jokes and some people are being very mean and rude to each other. But this is the nature of it, and I know the next is the next game against Columbus? No,
we've got a midweek game against Minnesota, and next weekend's Columbus.
Oh, can't wait! I can't wait to watch that one, man. I wish that was the first game at home. That would have been nuts.
yeah, for sure. And I think those of us who have been like following this all the way through, like since the beginning, our skin's pretty thick at this point, because like you said, we were a target then, and we're going to continue to be a target. And so I think a few years ago, a lot of us might have been like felt a little bit of a sting from a plane that says Precourt is a snake. But I think most of the people who have been paying attention to this for a long time saw it and probably had the same reaction I did, which was to laugh, because you spent probably a lot of money on that, and what percentage of the stadium even knew what that meant? Like,
exactly
less than 20%. It's got to be, right? Maybe even less than that. But yeah, I think at the end of the night, just the kind of energy that supporter section was creating and the atmosphere in the whole stadium, I don't understand how any Austin fan after that could feel like self-conscious about any of that, because it was really special to be a part of, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, all it was missing was a goal.
Absolutely. The building would have exploded if a goal had been scored at the end there. All right. Well, Christian, thanks so much for joining us and taking a little bit of time to share your experience in Austin. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners find your work? If by chance some of our listeners don't already know where to find you, where can they find you?
All good. You can watch the Cooligans on Fubo TV every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern. We're on Fubo Sports Network. You can go to fubosportsnetwork.com to watch the show for free. Or if you're a Fubo TV subscriber, I'm sure you've seen my face on the menu from time to time. And we have the Cooligans podcast as well, which you could just search wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us at Soccer Cooligans on everything.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. We'll have to get you and Alexis back down here soon.
No doubt, brother. Thank you again.
Well, you don't need words to tell me things.
All right. We want to thank Christian Polanco one more time for joining us. Christian he's such a good dude. Him and Alexis from the Cooligans are such good dudes. Listeners, if you're not familiar with the Cooligans, I think they're doing some of the coolest thing, like one of the coolest things in MLS culture right now, which is kind of expanding that bubble of bringing like a larger culture. They don't always even talk about the game of soccer. They talk about players and kind of the culture surrounding the game. And so I think they're doing something really special and have created a pretty big and loyal fan base. So if you're not familiar with their work, check it out, either the TV show or they put it out as a podcast as well. But it's excellent, very funny, and always very entertaining. Christian and I got to know each other I was traveling to New York quite a bit for work a few years ago. And I just reached out one time and he was super nice. And so we hung out at a game, in my CFC game one time. And then I would go back to town and I just reach out and say, hey, I'm back in town. Like, yeah, let's go get lunch, and would invite me out to go do stuff. And we're always the nicest guys in the world. But I was very excited for him to come here, because knowing, being on the inside here in Austin, I think we all knew what was being created here and how special it was going to be. But it didn't feel like the outside world had quite picked that up yet. Right. So I was very excited to have him here and to kind of show off our culture. And he came out to the Murga party, and I got to introduce him to guys like Rigo and Mateo and all those people who kind of helped build the Murga culture up. And then the folks who had helped build the supporters culture here. And then, it was really cool. And I was really proud to kind of show our culture off to someone from the outside. And, and I think he had a good time. I think he was impressed with it all. And I think Austin should be very proud of what happened on Saturday, even if we didn't win the game. But let's jump in and talk about that game. How about it?
Yeah, let's do it. And one thing I want to add, because you're always like, oh, I'm Landon, a guy from West Texas. And you're like, then I played in a traveling band, and then I hung out with the Cooligans, and I lived like on the coast in Spain. So like, I feel like every time we do one of these shows, like I find out something new about like Landon's world travels or adventures. Or maybe, like, do you have any other secrets you want to reveal now, or should we just talk about the game?
Yeah, I like to remain a mystery, Jeremiah. So we'll save it for another anecdote in the podcast at some point.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's talk about the lineup.
So yeah, it was same 11 as the last two games, right?
Right.
No changes, but we were curious to see what the formation was going to be. I think in Chris Bills's preview before the game, he predicted that we would see a 4-3-3 again, just to try to maybe control the game a bit more in possession. And he was right. We saw that 4-3-3 with Cecilio at the 9. I think later on they might have shifted a little bit to a 4-4-2, but it was less so than what we saw in the previous game. But they were still defending in a 4-4-2, so Pochettino would go up and be up top with Cecilio in defense, but then in attack it was a straight up 4-3-3 with Cecilio playing that false nine and dropping in and getting involved in build up and kind of combining with the midfielders there. So I thought this was a pretty, for a 0-0 draw, this was a pretty exciting game, right? Like, it was a lot of fun to watch, even though there were no goals scored.
It was, and I heard that from people who've only seen soccer on TV. And so one of the things I heard is like the live in-game experience is just miles better than watching the game on TV, sort of no matter what. But yeah, I had that same thought too. It was like the most exciting 0-0 draw of my life. And then I also didn't know. I mean, I've got a lot of emotional investment in what was Saturday, and if that had been a Wednesday in September, against Salt Lake City, would I feel that same way or not? So it's very hard for me to be objective about how exciting it was. But I mean, we did generate a lot of chances. I mean, that's something that we'll talk about throughout, right? There was a lot of opportunity, and I think we talked about this last week, where I feel like sometimes Josh talks about opportunities and lack of ruthlessness, and I feel like he's overblowing a little bit. But I did feel like in this match, like, we had a lot of really, really good chances that we didn't convert. So I can buy that it was a pretty exciting 0-0 draw.
Yeah, for sure. The first chance in this game came in the 10th minute with Diego Fagundez. It was a free kick from a little bit deeper. Cecilio took it. It wasn't a very great delivery. The first one in wasn't, but the rebound bounced out to Kolmanic, who put in a really nice cross that Diego Fagundez was able to get his head on. It was kind of a high arching one, and it didn't look super dangerous at first, but he forced Marcinkowski to make a save, and that was going in the top corner if Marcinkowski didn't get to that one. And so that was a really promising chance early on.
I was going to say on the rewatch, because I didn't quite appreciate, like, live in the stadium how close that was, but I thought about on the rewatch, like, people would have blown the roof off that stadium if 10 minutes in that would have gone in. And that just made me, the first time, at very first, I was like, I wonder if he's going to score. And then I was like, wait a minute, I saw this game yesterday. I know for sure that it's like he's not going to. But I thought, man, what a waste, not a wasted opportunity, but like that could have been, it would have been incredible if that had gone in, and like what that might have meant for the rest of the night. It's just something to think about.
For sure. One thing I want to mention at this point in time is, I said Cecilio's delivery wasn't great. I don't really like Cecilio taking set pieces. I feel like we have other players on the team who are more dangerous on them. One of them being Kolmanic. I think Kolmanic's crosses are beautiful, and I'm sure there's other strategy going into it about in swingers and out swingers, because I think we saw 3 or 4 different guys take set pieces, and so I'm not sure what the strategy is there, but most of Cecilio's weren't great deliveries and weren't really in the most dangerous spots. Whereas when we saw Kolmanic or Pochettino take them, they tended to be a little bit more accurate and get into more dangerous spots. So John Kolmanic ended up taking several more later in the game, but that's something I'd like to see more of and get Cecilio in the box where he can maybe put one of those in. But the next moment that I wanted to hit was Christian Espinosa got in behind Jan Kolmanic, gets to the edge of the box and puts in a low cross. And it looked like that was going to be a really dangerous moment. And all of a sudden, Alex Ring comes out of nowhere, sprinting back from deep in the midfield to slide in and block it. And I think I've seen some criticism of Ring for this game. Most of it with what he was doing going forward. And there's another thing that I'll criticize him for later in the game, but there were 3 or 4 moments where he really saved another player's bacon with a heroic play like that. And so I think there's reasons to criticize his attacking prowess. But what he gives to you in plays like this, I think he more than makes up for any of that. In the 16th minute, there was I noticed it during the game, but didn't really think that much about it. But there was a possible goal shout. And so it's, again, Cecilio taking a free kick from deep. Julio Cascante got his head on it, and it went straight at Marcinkowski. and it looked like he carried the ball backwards into his own goal. Which I was like, well, are they going to look at that? But then they blew the whistle. And I think I saw some people posting about that on social media saying that should have been a goal. But I think they called a foul on Cascante for like pushing off of somebody when he went up for the header. So I don't think there was much there. I think one of Cecilio's wasted chances came in the 40th minute. There's a corner for San Jose. It falls to La Chofis on the back side of the box, like on the far side of the box. Cecilio is rushing at him and kind of pokes it away, and Chofis like falls down, and Cecilio is able to jump over him. Cecilio gathers the ball and sprints upfield, springs a counterattack. He has Stroud in a ton of space on the right hand side, and Cecilio tries to hit it with the outside of his foot, but kind of mishits it. And it just falls to a center back, and Stroud looked pretty upset with him.
I remember that look. I remember that look too. Yeah, that could have been a really great chance there. That was a little bit wasted by just a lack of execution. But kind of the story of the season so far, right? Yeah, for sure. I know Josh talked about that a lot. When we talk about X goals, we'll see that too. But Josh talked about that a lot in the press conferences, both after the game and this week, about the lack of finishing. And I think our expected goals are like 12, and we've scored 6 so far. So there's plenty of chances that are going unmet out on the field.
Yeah. In the 41st minute, Chris Wondolowski put in a cross that kind of forced an awkward save. It looked like it was one of those that was probably like a cross to the back post that he was hoping somebody would slide into. Stuver comes off the line and blocks it. Christian Espinosa is coming in hot on the other side, and Beasler does what Matt Beasler does best. He kind of lunges in, sticks one foot in at the exact right moment, and prevents a shot from getting off. So we saw Matt Beasler have a bunch of block shots last week, and he had a few really important ones this week as well. So that was the half. There wasn't a ton of chances in the first half. We ended up seeing more in the second. One thing I wanted to mention at halftime is the grounds crew coming out. The pitch looked like it was getting a little bit torn up during the game. You could see spots where there was like big wrinkles in the field and divots being pulled up. You could see Weston Applefeller, the head groundskeeper, and his team going out there. One thing I wanted to ask, since you're a little bit closer to the field than I am, could you see Weston's face, or any of the grounds crew's face, and like what was the mood on the field with those guys?
Yeah, so Weston, for at least the first half, basically the whole first half, sort of occupied the southwest corner, which is around by supporters, which is where we were. And he was like squatted down low with, he was obviously concerned about what was going on. There were big chunks of it coming up. And on the broadcast, they talked about what was going on. It seemed like it was mostly on the edges, sort of toward the sidelines of the field. But yeah, he had that, and he was sitting on a big Yeti bucket full of something. I don't know, sand or dirt or whatever.
Sunflower seeds.
Yeah, when play would go to the there you go. When play would go to the north end, he would sort of sneak over to the edges and like stomp down some divots and stuff. So definitely he was, because we had him on the show before, and I think we asked him what he would do, during the first match. And he talked a lot about like laying on, like being low to the ground and like taking photos of what was going on and stuff. And I did see him at times where like he was like almost laying down with his phone out, like taking pictures of specific areas of the field. So I think, trying to find out what to work on or whatever. So I don't have like an educated turf science degree opinion upon the cause of that. But the one thing I do know is like this turf is supposed to be super drought resistant, right? Because that was one of the things we talked about. And I can't imagine that like the rainiest May in Austin history did a lot of favors for a turf that's like sold on a different sort of different characteristics. But Weston,
Yeah.
if you want to talk to us again and correct that, if you listen, we'd love to hear about it, because I know people are interested and people care.
Yeah. I was too far away to see what Weston's face looked like, but I could imagine that he was pretty stressed out during that time. I saw at one point Julio Cascante, it was very early on in the game, I think. There was like an errant pass, and Julio Cascante hustled over the line and kind of slid and like swept the ball with his leg back into play, and then picked up and was able to play it forward. But after that, he kind of went back and just like picked up a big chunk of the turf and like threw it back into the hole that it came out of. So Yeah, hopefully that is just a rain thing and not a larger issue. But I guess we'll find out if they're able to get it back into good shape by Sunday for the Columbus game. So in the second half, there were a lot more chances in the second half. I thought Austin controlled the beginning of that half pretty well. But then later on, as the heat started getting to players and people got tired, it was wide open for the last 30 minutes or so. The first real chance for Austin was in the 51st minute. Gallagher, he looked like a man on a mission on that left wing. We talked about last week, San Jose doing that man marking system, right? They were playing Judson, who's normally a defensive midfielder. I think they've had some I don't know if it's injuries or if they're just looking to get their best players on the field, but Judson was playing at right back. And so Gallagher looked like he was like, I'm going to take this guy on every time I get the ball because I know I'm going to be one-on-one with him. And he was pretty successful. I thought Gallagher was one of the better players for pretty large stretches of the game. And so in this moment, in the 51st minute, he skins Judson like he had done a few times before, puts in a bouncing cross that nobody gets to. Pochettino ends up kind of following up on the backside and picks it up, puts in a really low, hard cross for Cecilio at the near post. He gets a foot to it, but it bounces off of Marcinkowski. I don't know that there's much else Cecilio could have done given the circumstances, but that was a pretty dangerous moment. Mentioned criticizing Ring in the 63rd minute. There's a moment that really annoyed me from Alex Ring. As much good as he did in this game, there was a moment here in the 63rd minute that I did not like. So it was really good build-up play in combination from Fagundez. I think Fagundez picked it up pretty deep on the right, on like the right-hand side. Does a big long dribble into the middle, beats a guy, ends up like doing a 1-2 pass with Cecilio, and it opened up, like the movement opened up a big gap behind, like at the top of the box, and Alex Ring ends up running into that space. Fagundez finds him, so Ring receives it and turns to goal. In that moment, there was a center back in front of Alex Ring. On the right-hand side, you had Jared Stroud, who was kind of like crashing towards the penalty spot. You had John Gallagher on the left-hand side, who was kind of on the outside of the box crashing in as well. Just judging by line of sight, he could have easily gotten the ball to Gallagher in that moment. And I don't know that it would have been an easy shot, but it would have been a really dangerous moment. If he would have looked to his right, Jared Stroud, it would just been like a very easy pass, and Stroud would have had a shot from the penalty spot, essentially. Alex Ring instead takes an extra touch, dribbles forward, and takes a shot himself. The shot ended up being a pretty dangerous area and a decent shot, but it ends up getting saved. I think he should have had better awareness there. I don't know that he ever even saw Stroud, which is a problem. It was wide open and not in a blind spot or anything. He just didn't look up and see him. That was my biggest criticism of Ring for this game, is that moment. I thought defensively he saved our butts a couple of times, but that one kind of irked me.
So on the Monday press conference, Josh said that players might have been pushing too hard to be the first person to score the goal at home, and left didn't make some passes. I mean, I feel like this was the biggest example of that out of the whole game.
Yeah, I feel like there was a couple of times when Stroud took a shot where he could have maybe made an extra pass. Pochettino took one from deep, but he just does that. So
that's always what he does, right? That's no different. It's very on brand. Yeah.
And then did Cecilio ever take one that you thought maybe he shouldn't have?
I thought Cecilio. No, I thought his shot selection in this game was pretty good.
Yeah, and then Nick Lima took a couple of shots that I was actually okay with. I usually, judging on what I've seen so far, I think I said a couple of weeks ago I'd be happy if he never took another shot, and he took a couple this week that I was actually okay with. So he has my permission to shoot again now. In the 66th minute, there was a header from Gallagher that was a decent chance. It was on target, but it got saved pretty easily. The 67th minute is about when my heart started beating a lot faster, and I was seeing if I had evidence of this, and I went back and looked at my Fitbit app, and it really did. Like, I did the math, and like the time that there was a spike in my heart rate monitor, it was about the 67th minute of the game. So you start seeing Austin players get leggy. They look tired. And at that exact moment, San Jose subs on Cade Cowell, he's 17-year-old, very good athlete. He's got young, fresh legs in this game. He's been really dangerous in a lot of moments this year as a 17-year-old. So that made me really nervous to see fresh, athletic legs coming on against a very tired and hot Matt Beasler and Julio Cascante. So that was something I was going to be watching for and like being terrified of. They ended up having a few moments. Cal did. We were able to kind of minimize those fairly well, but definitely some scary moments. And like I said before, the end of the match was wide open. Both teams were completely toasted. Lots of kind of half chances or moments that could have been good chances with better execution. But in the 83rd minute, Brad Stuver makes a fantastic save. San Jose was in transition. They find Cade Cowell, who I mentioned before, in space. I think it's maybe a little bit wide, and Cascante is able to kind of cut off the angle to make him, instead of going at goal, he kind of checks back. He lays it off to Fierro, who hits a really hard curler at that back post, and a really great reaction save from Stuver. I think a better placed shot. It would have had to be a really good shot to beat Stuver's save, honestly. But yeah, a great save from Stuver there. Another big save from Stuver in the 90th minute. San Jose was taking a corner. They found Oswaldo Alanis in the box. He placed it really well just inside the right post. And Stuver was able to kind of dive over and get a hand on it. And I think that was maybe his best save of the game. It was like maybe not as spectacular as the one before, but that one was really big and was able to kind of essentially save the game with that one right there.
Yeah, I have a coworker who went, and he texted me, I guess, Sunday. And he's like, and he's not a soccer fan at all. He's like, I don't know anything about soccer, but our keeper is really good. And he specifically spoke because his seats were really down low, and he spoke specifically to those, and just how quick a guy that size is on like decision making and reaction, and just how he not having like been in the stadium before and seen that live, like didn't appreciate what all goes into that. And he was just like blown away by Stuver, and I kind of told him, welcome to the club. Like, we are all blown away by Stuver, now, but it was cool to hear that from somebody else that's like not a lifelong fan.
Yeah, there's like the craft side of goalkeeping, which I think Stuver is also quite good at, but just that reaction. And he seems to be performing really highly in both of those areas. So, once again, King Bradley saves us. He didn't have to save us as much as he did in the last few games, but still, I think he ended up with 9 saves. Really good performance. We ended up only using 3 subs, one of them in the 93rd minute. So in the first 90 minutes, only 2 subs used. What do you think? What did you think of that? And like, why were there so few used?
The only reason I can think to use that view is if Josh is looking at this like these next 8 days over like all together, and because it was hot. Those guys were tired. They were getting leggy, but sometimes you just gotta put in a little extra effort and put in a little extra time, like in game one, to preserve some energy, for others in future matches. I mean, that's my best guess about why he did it. Do you have a different thought on it?
No, I think it's a combination. I mean, we talked about last week why he made so few subs or waited so long to sub. I think it's a combination this week of a thin bench, just not having that many players on the bench that in the positions where he would have wanted to make a sub. And then, I think the rotation has a lot to do with it. Maybe he's saying, like, I want Rodney to go 90 on Wednesday, and so we're just going to not use him today. There could be other reasons why Rodney specifically didn't play, but I imagine these are the things that he's thinking about. Is we're going to have to rotate with this really heavy schedule this week. And so, it was hard to watch some of those guys keep running at that point, but it's going to be a tough week with these 3 games and traveling to Minnesota on Wednesday. So, I think that's probably had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. And, one of those subs was like basically Diego was unable to stand anymore after running
Yeah.
like running nonstop all match. I think we should probably talk about him next a little bit in terms of individual players.
Absolutely.
But that
Yeah.
guy was all over the place.
He was such a warrior, like so good. Just his work rate was amazing. He was always available. He's not a guy that makes like a big play. Like he's not that play breaker number 10, but always available to receive a pass, always helping the ball move forward, works really hard on defense, presses really hard, tracks back when he needs to. And like you said, he on TV when I rewatched it, you couldn't see this, but in person in the stadium, at one moment, I think in the 92nd minute or something, he's calling for a sub. He's like, I'm done. I cannot do it anymore. Right at that moment, San Jose breaks, and I think it's Christian Espinosa is running. Diego's like, all right, I got one more in me, and he sprints 60, 70 yards to close that angle down, and the play ends up turning into nothing because he kind of like stretches the track for Espinosa where he's not able to do anything. But at that point, he falls to the ground and he's like, I can't move anymore. You have to take me off at this point. And so, like I said, absolute warrior. He's like, I think a lot of fans fell in love with him just because of how engaged he's been with the fan base. And anybody who wasn't in love with him for those things are falling in love with him because of how hard he works on the pitch. And he said this in press conferences. He's like, tell me where to go, tell me what to do. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to empty my tank on the field every time. Like, you don't have to worry about that with me. I'm going to leave everything I have on the pitch every time you put me on there.
Yeah.
One thing I saw on Twitter was Stephanie Crognola and Mike Ellison suggested that you've watched Ted Lasso, right?
Yes.
So there's the chant that they do for Roy Kent, the Roy Kent character, and it's Roy Kent, he's here, he's there, he's every effing where. And they were suggesting, Mike and Steph were suggesting that we should adapt that song for Diego Fagundez, and I think that is absolutely fitting. That just the amount of ground he covers, how hard he works, he is here, he's there, he's every effing where, and that would be great. So Morga, get on it.
It would fit him really well too. What about Gallagher? We talked about a little bit. Josh said in the press conference that he felt like that was Gallagher's best performance of the year on this game. I think Gallagher was more critical of himself than Josh was, which is, I think, probably something good that you always want out of a player. And said that he needed to find that killer instinct, and talked about how he managed to find it in Atlanta last year. When he scored, led the team with 4 goals. But he feels like the floodgates will open with his next goal. So it was good to see him play the way he did and really be aggressive and be a strong part of the attack.
Absolutely. Gallagher also mentioned I think he did the post-game press conference on Saturday. He mentioned an injury, a calf injury that he had been kind of nursing. And so if you think of when he had his best games, it was a little over a month ago. And then since then, he's been a little bit quiet. And so to see him say like, yeah, I'm healthy now, I'm feeling better, and to have a performance like this, even though still some things lacking, but showed some really bright moments. So hopefully we'll get some more out of him in the future. Other individuals I want to talk about, we already talked about Stuver. Amazing performance. What are these stats that you have written here?
Oh, I was looking at the X goals allowed, which is like the projected goals allowed, and his X goals allowed should be 18.2, and we have allowed half that. So I think that shows a pretty good job of, like, by far the worst. I mean, the most, which is the worst in the league as far as like what you should expect. So that, I think that did a really good job, like in terms of numbers and showing like what he's doing to save us repeatedly so far this year.
Yeah, in layman's terms, he's stopping shots that he shouldn't be able to stop.
and not even a little bit. Like, he should have let in 18 and let in 9, like a bunch of shots. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought Kolmanich had a really solid game. Christian Espinosa is like a little bit of like he's kind of a son of a bitch in a good way, like the kind that you want on your team. And Jean was like battling him the whole game. They were like going after each other. And I thought he showed like really good character to to fight like that and not ever get discouraged or like get worked up too much with playing against a player like that. And then was really solid on the ball, was really useful in build up and kind of carrying the ball forward. So I thought he was good. Cecilio Dominguez. So played at the 9, like I said before, is dropping in, started some really nice moves, fought really hard. He would get challenged and he'd kind of put a shoulder into guy and ride a challenge and end up carrying the ball past that player. Did that several times. One thing that I really liked from Cecilio in this game, and also from Pochettino, I noticed that in previous games that they would both kind of drop in and receive a ball from midfield or receive a ball from a center back, and there would be space behind them, and they would just like receive the ball and kind of carry the ball backwards or like play a backwards pass. In this game, they were receiving it, taking that half turn and driving forward, which it's a thing that I've seen there for them to take in games before, and they just weren't doing it. And this time, each of them did it several times to end up creating some pretty dangerous moves. So I really liked that about both of them. I think that's something that they can both be really dangerous on. And then Cecilio also just kind of with these little flicks, he would one time pass it and then turn and make a run. And he was really dangerous there. And so I really liked what I saw from Cecilio.
Now, but you said he stood up to some stuff, but he did also pick up a embellishment fine.
Oh yeah.
So he also had some dramatic moments. And the friend who came with me, she's like, I like this guy because he seems really talented and also very dramatic. And this is like, that's kind of my thing. So,
oh yeah. Yeah. So he was chasing, I don't remember who the player was, but chasing him down the sideline, defending it. So Cecilio worked really hard in defense as well. He was another guy who kind of emptied his tank by the end of the night, but he was chasing a guy and the guy kind of like swats back at him with a hand. And Cecilio grabs his face and goes to ground. I watched in the stadium, I was like, he's probably faking it, but I don't know for sure. Watching it again on TV afterwards, definitely faking it. The hand did not touch his face. It hit him in the chest. And apparently MLS, player punishment committee or whatever it's called, agreed. And so they are giving him a fine. Glad he's not going to have to miss any games, but yeah. That's the game that Cecilio is playing. It's a game of risk and reward, and he took the risk side this time.
You have a note here about Manny Perez, which I think is an interesting player to discuss briefly. Like, how do you feel about him?
Yeah, he's looked really good for what little time he's on. He came on for Jared Stroud in the 71st minute. I thought he looked good again, like he did last week. I've seen some people saying they want to see him start a game. I'm not entirely sure if he brings like any technicality or skill that Stroud or Gallagher don't already have. I'm curious if it's just a situation of him benefiting from being the fresh legs off the bench. So I thought he's looked good, but as far as him starting, like I haven't seen anything to make me think that he can do things that Jared Stroud and John Gallagher can't do. I'd be happy for him to prove me wrong, but in any case, like worst case scenario, he's a good spark off the bench, which is always a good thing to have.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think he is going to get his chance to start probably in the next few weeks. Maybe on
Wednesday.
On numbers, and based upon the depth. Jimenez is back, but it's still a pretty thin roster. How about some stats? I noticed we got outpossessed for the third week in a row, but I felt like we still had the best of the opportunities.
Only barely, though. I think it was like a 1% difference by the end of the game. And so, yeah, I think Austin started like the first 30 minutes, like 10 percentage points up on possession. And then after that, San Jose went ahead. And then by the end of the game, it evened out. I think it was like 49-51 or something. But I think you're right. Austin got more shots. I think it was 20 shots to San Jose's 13. San Jose had more on target, which was 9-6, but I feel like, I don't know, I felt the same way as you. Like, I feel like we were making more dangerous chances. Do the stats actually play that out, or?
Yes, we had more chances created. We out created them on chances, of 14-11. There's another stat that's like big chances. I don't remember what it is. Like, I don't think it's called dangerous chances, but we led that one too. So I think that like Stuver had those two saves you talked about, but I mean he had for Stuver he had a lot of like just sort of easy saves.
Quite a few that just hit him in the chest and he caught them, right?
Yeah, I mean so they were on target, but they weren't really threats.
And another one that I saw was Austin had 8 blocked shots, like 8 of their own shots blocked. And so like ones that maybe would have been on target that a defender got in the way of. So that may be a little bit skewed as well. But yeah, it was an encouraging thing to see more chances being created after several games in a row where that just wasn't happening at all. Even if none of them went in, like it would have been great for some of them to go in, but it's good to see that the chances are happening.
Yeah, it felt like progress. I think we should cover probably the most Moon Tower soccer topic that I forwarded you on Twitter, and that was the guys coming off the bus. Like, who's your most handsome? I don't know if it's most handsome boy off the bus or like
the best
dressed boy off the bus. And if you haven't seen Cecilio's cowboy hat, outfit, Texas belt buckle, just get up, like you should. And I think we have to exclude him from this competition.
Yeah, the Twitter community quickly said like it was clearly Cecilio, so you just need to make a separate category of like Cecilio wins, who got second, essentially. Who is your pick, Jeremiah?
I like John Gallagher's look. I like the all black suit with the black shirt. And then in the post game press conference, he was wearing it again too. And I feel like it would have been hard to get if I had run as much as John Gallagher did. I would want to be in like sweat short, like workout shorts and a t-shirt, and not like get back into that suit. So I would say he was my second favorite. How about you?
Like I've reviewed the tape several times, Jeremiah. I watched the game twice. I'll watch the guys getting off the bus at least twice. I got to go with my guy Julio. He just like wearing, it was like a much simpler outfit than what Cecilio is wearing, but he just wore it. He looked so damn cool wearing it. And so I got to go with my guy my guy Julio.
He did. He looked really good too. And this is not outfit related, but shout out again to Romagna's thighs. He was warm up in the corner, and this friend of mine that was at the game with me, she's like, "Who is that guy?" And like, how many squats a day does he do? So it's pretty incredible. And Diego was like rocking the thighs too. Did you notice that? Like he like intentionally pull his shorts up for the second half, or what was going on?
There was at one point, I think it was either Ashley or my mom was like, "Did he take his shorts off?" It looked like he was like going Pooh Bear and just wearing a t-shirt. All right. Anything else we need to cover?
No, I don't think so. I think we can probably wrap up this part of it.
Okay. All right. Let's transition into the upcoming week. So we've got, like I said before, busy week. Minnesota on Wednesday in Minnesota, and then we've got Columbus here in Austin on Sunday. What do we know about Minnesota? I guess we've already seen them play, but what has changed for them since the last time we saw them?
Well, again, we thought they were going to be really good going into the season, and a lot of us picked them to win the Western Conference. But they sit currently in 11th. They were just behind Austin, who's in 10th. But they played one less match. I mean, they've scored only 7 goals through 8 games, so they're definitely searching for answers in the attack. And Robin, was it Lude?
I think it's pronounced Lude.
Robin Lude is the only player who has more than one goal so far this year for them, and he actually will not be playing in the Austin match because he's on international duty and playing in the Euros. So they're still looking for answers in the attack, but they recently added 2 attackers who are finally in town, or what's the deal with these guys?
So they had signed Adrian Unu is a striker that they had actually signed before our last game, but like I think they had like literally just signed the paperwork, so I don't even know if he's in the country yet. He is now playing and looked pretty good in their most recent game. And then another guy was playing on the left wing, Franco Fragapane. I think for one of the goals, maybe I don't know if it was their only goal or one of 2 goals, but Fragapane ended up assisting. No, I think it's the other way around. Unu assisted a goal for Fragapane. And so this is going to be a pretty different attack than what we saw in that first game against Minnesota. Recent form hasn't been great. I think it's 2 draws, and then did they win 2 or
They won 2-1 the one right before that. So
Okay.
in the last 3 matches they played Dallas, RSL, and Dallas. They beat Dallas, and they've drawn RSL and Dallas in the last 3 matches. And I think this will be interesting overall because Josh talked about squad rotation given midweek games, and also mentioned so we still have. He said today I think Schoenfeld and Houston are still both that do not expect to see them anytime soon. So I think the lack of depth in the roster is going to be a factor again on Wednesday for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna cut to an interview with Patrick Murphy from SB Nation's Massive Report in Columbus to preview the Columbus game here in a second. One thing I want to say before we do that is this next month or so is going to be pretty rough. We've got 3 games this week. After that, we come home, and I think we play Portland, Seattle, LAFC, and I can't remember, or in Columbus, who's in good form right now. A really tough stretch of games, also on a thin roster, and in a moment where it's very obvious where we need reinforcements, but we can't sign them yet because the window's not open yet. So I think it's going to be probably a kind of trying month for Austin fans. I still I would encourage fans to still not give up hope yet. I think there's going to be moments in the next month. I'm predicting moments in the next month where we're probably going to want to, but I still say let's wait until August to really judge this team once we can bring in those reinforcements and see what the team looks like after that. But yeah, it's going to be a tough stretch of games here for sure. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll be back with Patrick Murphy of the Massive Report. Moon Tower Soccer is brought to you by our friends at FVF Law, the official injury lawyers of Austin FC.
FVF is a different kind of personal injury law firm dedicated to community, transparency, and client education.
You can go to fvf.law to find out what makes FVF a different kind of injury law firm and why understanding your legal options can dramatically change the outcome of a case. Once again, that's fvf.law. All right, we are now joined by Patrick Murphy of SB Nation's Massive Report. Patrick, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
First of all, just tell us a little bit about your background as a fan and as a writer, and who all you write for.
Yeah, so I was a fan well before I started writing, obviously. I got into the crew very casually as a young kid through my dad and kind of as a family thing back when it first kind of got started in 96. I actually lived in St. Louis at the time. My dad had just moved to Columbus and married my stepmom. So we were coming up on weekends from time to time and going to games when it was at Ohio Stadium. We moved here just before the stadium opened in Columbus. And, my parents at that point had season tickets. And so I started going to games very young, was a big fan throughout high school and most of college, started kind of doing some media stuff while I was in college at Ohio State. And then that kind of evolved from there. And doing stuff for Massive Report really helped, honestly, to help me find a career. I cover Ohio State football and basketball and some other sports now. So it was kind of a resume builder, springboard type of thing that I stuck with because I enjoy doing it. I've always had a passion for soccer and the team and whatnot. So kind of a nice helper out there that I really enjoy.
So the expectations for the crew were really high at the beginning of the season. They ended up having a pretty slow start and looked pretty rough for the first several games, but they're now starting to find their form. I think it's 3 wins in a row.
Yeah.
So what is kind of the sentiment around the crew right now, and how do things feel around the team?
As you said, I mean, you come off an MLS Cup win. The expectations are going to be high, even on kind of a weird year like last year was. And then you add some big names from at least MLS circles in Bradley Wright Phillips and Kevin Molino. That only increases expectations, especially locally. So, it definitely was a tough start. They had a handful of injuries coming into the season that I don't think you generally just expect. I mentioned Molino. He just made his debut this past weekend because he was dealing with injuries for the first, I don't know, was it 3 months into the season now? And he was their big, probably off-season signing. A handful of other guys have dealt with a lot of things. So that, on top of playing in the CONCACAF Champions League, they obviously made it to the I think it's around a 16, the second round of this year's tournament. So that added 4 more games to the slate early on. So it was honestly probably handled about as well as they could have. You'd like to see them get some more results, couple draws that, if things go a different way, maybe, you end up with 3 points in one of those games. But, all in all, I think the team felt, given all of that they were in a good spot coming out of the Champions League. Finally started to turn the form right before this 3-week international break, had two wins in a row. They wanted to carry that momentum over into this last weekend's game, got a win against Chicago, the last game at Crew Stadium. So, it was a big kind of emotional night for a variety of reasons. But one of the big things was getting a W and kind of keeping that momentum rolling. And the team was happy to do that. So, yeah, things seem to be moving more in a positive direction, but guys are still coming back from injury. Team's not still fully healthy. So, it'll be interesting, another midweek match this week, kind of how it all rolls into this game on Sunday.
Can you talk a little bit about the style of play, like what people should expect if they're watching the game on Sunday?
Sure. It's not a ton different than the way that I know Josh Wolf plays with Austin. Obviously he's a disciple of Greg Berhalter when Greg was here, and Caleb Porter plays a similar, not completely same way, but still possession focused, a lot of building out of the back. They'll play a little bit more direct than I think Josh prefers to, and obviously Greg did. But similar type of setup, and a holding midfielder. They'll sometimes drop in with the center backs, wing backs that push high a lot of the time. Now that's changed a little bit based on personnel this year, but they've kind of figured that out. They look to put in a lot of balls into the box for Giassi Zardes. That's his thing. Just popping up in the right spots as he did on Saturday. So yeah, it's going to look, I honestly think it'll be two teams that want to play very similarly in this game. And it'll kind of come down to which can do that. But yeah, a lot of possession. They want to control the game. They want to play entertaining soccer. It was funny when Caleb came here, because a lot of the same things that Greg Berhalter used to say about how they want to play, things like that. And, I know from Josh's time here that he kind of follows that methodology.
So Austin and Columbus probably had the two biggest parties in MLS this year, or this week, with Austin opening a new stadium, Columbus saying goodbye to a stadium. There's, of course, other history between these two teams. Do you think this is going to turn into a proper rivalry, or do you think this is something that will kind of fizzle out over time?
Yeah, it's funny. We just got done recording our podcast for this week, and we had a very similar conversation. And it's interesting, the mixed opinions that I get, not only from the guys I was just with, but from other Crew fans I talked to. Some people are very adamant that they do not like Austin because of the history you kind of alluded to. Others are, like, that doesn't matter. We got our team, they got their team. Let bygones be bygones. So my kind of perspective is that I think this game really matters to probably both sets of fans, or at least, both teams. I know, talking to some of the Crew players that were here, when everything was happening a few years ago, like this matters to them because of that history. But I feel like after this first game, and maybe, if next year the game's in Columbus, if the two teams play again, maybe the first game in Columbus. But to me, it seems like, this becomes just a normal game. Obviously MLS is building this one up, putting it on national TV and whatnot. But, I think in a rivalry, you need to play regularly. You need to have a lot of history, things like that. And it's going to be tough being in separate conferences and things. I think it's an interesting story that could, if they were closer proximity or something like that, could kind of build into something that maybe even years down the line, people don't even really know how it started. But with the way the league's set up, I think it's just tough if you only play once a year, maybe not even, to kind of keep that going. But I do think Saturday or Sunday, I guess, will be a game that will be contentious on both sides of things. And I think, both teams want to get a win for a variety of reasons.
So have you heard about, do you think there'll be many Columbus supporters who make the trip down? Like, is it a destination thing or not? Again, there's like a mixed group. There's some people that's like, we're not going down there. And there's other people that I know definitely looked into it. I know there was a big thing made about the price of away tickets this past, like last week, which, is an entirely separate issue that we could talk about on a whole different topic. But, I would imagine that some Crew fans would be down there, but, I haven't heard. I honestly expected there to be more people interested in going for this game than what I've heard about. Now, I am not as engaged with the fan base as I used to be now covering it. But like the people that I talk to regularly, it doesn't sound like there's a huge traveling contingent, which I think would have been cool. I think it's cool for any game to have, like last weekend at the last Crew game, there was a good amount of Fire fans that had their section, and, it just makes the atmosphere more interesting. I certainly think it would have been interesting for this game. Obviously, I hope, hopefully nothing would have happened in a negative sense, but, I think it would have been fun. But no, I'm not sure. I'll be interested to see the numbers. I will be there covering the game, so I'm excited to see everything down there, but I don't know how many Crew fans. I would be surprised if it's a large contingent at this point. We'll buy you a beer. Look us up. We'll be happy to do that for sure. We'll be down there. And I think any Crew fans, we'd be happy to do that for it too. So this is my question. Like, we saw the pre-court as a snake banner that flew over the stadium. And I haven't asked Landon this either. I personally enjoy this kind of like petty fan antagonism and would encourage more of it. So like, I'm 100% behind it, but like, what did you think about it? And do you know where it came from?
So I didn't even know about it until Sunday. I was playing in my co-ed rec soccer game and somebody brought it up, and I hadn't heard about it. I hadn't seen it. There'd been so much going on Saturday on my end that I missed that somehow. So no, I don't know. Now we were discussing this again on our podcast here just a little while ago. And one of the guys, said he did know who did it. I didn't pry on who did it. But he said that the person who did its sole focus was to derail pre-court's moment, and make it so that he's not as focused on this event, which is obviously a big deal, and kind of put that in the back of his mind. I think you just used the word petty. I do think it is that. I think it was funny when I heard about it. Here's what I will say. Everything that happened with Anthony here, anytime I ever interacted with him, which was, a decent amount. I mean, he wasn't around a ton, but a good amount. He was always great to me. I remember one time very specifically, we were out at practice and he came over to me and the Columbus Dispatch writer at the time and stood there and chatted with us. Was always a nice guy. So, I do think it's a little petty to do it. Am I surprised? Not at all. So maybe this is, I don't know, if stuff like this keeps happening, I guess this could be a bit more of a rivalry, maybe in the stands more than on the field. But, again, I think this is probably stuff that will, kind of go by the wayside after, this season or whatnot.
Yeah. I was asking people, like, how many people in the Austin Stadium even knew what that was about. And
sure,
my guess was below 20%. Do you have a number there, Jeremiah?
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, like where I was, because we were right by the supporters section, obviously a lot of people, a larger than average percentage of people knew it. But like the friend of mine I took to the game, she was like, first of all, who's Anthony Precourt? And then second of all, like, why would somebody say he's a snake?
Like, I thought Matthew McConaughey owned the team.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I've gotten that sense too, with other people I've talked to that live down there or are affiliated with the team, that there isn't a ton of recognition. I think there was a lot of back and forth on Twitter from some people, but I think that was a minority of both fan bases. I know it got kind of heated between those people, but at least from the crew perspective, I think it was like 4 or 5 people that were really jerks on Twitter, and I imagine it was the same. I can't remember every Austin fan that I was told about, but so
there was like specifically 4 or 5.
Okay, yeah. So I think that it's probably the same. It's it gets magnified because everyone sees it, or it gets sent out in group chats or whatever. But I think for the most part, I've never been to Austin. Like I said, I'll be down there. I'm excited. But everyone I've ever talked to has compared it very favorably to Columbus. I think college football towns that have kind of built around that. So I think that it's funny because I think a lot of people here really like look at Austin as kind of like a sister city type of thing. And the only animosity previously was Ohio State, Texas football games, and that those happen even less regularly than MLS games will. So it's funny that this has become a thing, and I think there was such a minor group that really got into it. That's why I don't think it will remain a thing unless the league like continues to push it as a nationally televised game and brings the story up every year and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's going to be in any case, it should be a fun event on Sunday. Yeah. So we're all looking forward to it. And like Jeremiah said, let us know where you're going to be, and we'll come find you and buy you a beer.
Sounds good. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. We want to thank Patrick one more time for joining us to talk about the Columbus game. This is going to be an interesting one to see, Jeremiah. Who knows what's going to happen. I think I've always been of the belief that what happens in this game could kind of set a tone for what the rivalry becomes. But again, it could just end up being nothing if we don't ever play each other again. But yeah, it'd be exciting to see. All right. Before we wrap up, we'd like to remind you to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Helps us grow our audience and exposes the show to more people. If you know someone who enjoys soccer, enjoys Austin FC, or is looking to get into it, please let them know about the show. We'd really appreciate it. We'd like to thank all the folks who have left us reviews over the last couple of weeks, who've reached out on social media. We've had some fun conversations over the last couple of weeks on Twitter and on Instagram. You can find us there at Moon Tower Soccer on both Twitter and Instagram. And then our personal ones are at LVAHero87 and then JBentley_ATX. Also like to ask you to visit the Striker Texas website. Jeremiah, do you have an article in mind this week?
Yeah, there's a good one from Chris Bills, which it's specifically about an issue that we've touched on, but we didn't directly address on the show because honestly we ran out of time. But it is, how can Austin FC get its offense unstuck before Columbus scores first at Q2? Which, for those of us that were in the great Twitter wars of 2017, 2018, I think the Columbus Crew scoring the first goal at Q2 Stadium would be a real kick in the pants, as they say.
It's a real concern, isn't it?
It is for sure. So, yeah, so read Chris's article, see the plan for getting our offense unstuck as soon as this weekend.
All right, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back in 1 week with a new episode of Moon Tower Soccer, where we will cover 2 games, which we've never done before, so we're going to have to figure out how to squeeze two games into one show. We'll also preview the upcoming match against Seattle, and any other news that comes up in between now and then. Until then, I'm Landon Cottom.
I'm Jeremiah Bentley.
We'll catch you next time.
No one is around.